You've been all by yourself through this?
You goofball.
The Walking Dead Telltale series is a special video game experience that heavily impacted the gaming world. These 4 games bring us on a beautiful journey through the Walking Dead universe and watching people combat it and try to live in it. The company that made them, Telltale Games, have made other great stories, but none of them quite live up to the impact and size that The Walking Dead got to. These games stood out early on in the gaming world for its focus on player choice. Your decisions directly impacted what happened in the game and was the driving factor of the narrative, which wasn't really ever seen before up to that point to this degree. These games were based off of the comic book series made by Robert Kirkman, and the time couldn't have been better to make these, as the comics were insanely popular and the TV show just finished up its 2nd season and was just continuing to grow in popularity. It was at the point where if you had anything with The Walking Dead in the title, it was gonna make you money. I think another massive factor in The Walking Dead games popping off was the YouTube community around it. I don't know what it was, but it seemed like every gaming channel in existence played these games. It was like a rite of passage to be classified as a gaming playthrough channel that you had to play through these games. And it's what got me interested in the series as well. But the journey wasn't always sunshines and rainbows, as Telltale and The Walking Dead games definitely went through their issues, which we'll get into in this video. Overall, The Walking Dead Telltale series is one of my favorite stories ever, and I deeply love everything about this franchise, even though it's not perfect. The journey that we see Clem go throughout these 4 seasons is a masterpiece. So with that being said, let's get right into things and start off with Season 1. On this day, Telltale released the first ever episode of the Walking Dead Telltale series titled A New Day. And instantly, this was a massive hit and was getting critically acclaimed from the get-go. This was Telltale's first attempt of going all in with the player choice concept, as they have a pretty interesting history leading up to The Walking Dead. They had games like Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, Sam & Max, and a bunch of other games that I'm not going to get into. And these games, for the most part, had a mixed reception, with some of them doing decently. But all these different IPs and games eventually built into what is kind of known as a Telltale style game, which is focused around player choice and your choices impacting the outcome of the game, which they heavily milked to death. But when it was fresh and seen as a new concept, it was beautiful and people ate it up, with the first episode of The Walking Dead selling over 1 million copies, which blew away expectations. And it did not slow down whatsoever, as the remaining episodes of the first season just continued to expand on top of one another and just really crafted one of the best stories in gaming. But what truly made The Walking Dead Season 1 into such a success in a game that is still praised now are the characters. I think this is arguably the best group in the entire franchise, along with Season 4. We play as a character named Lee. Well, Lee is just the GOAT in all honesty. This man was only in 1 game and arguably had the biggest impact out of anyone. We start the game with him in a police car for murdering the man that his wife cheated on him with. But luckily for him, the zombie apocalypse started, so he doesn't have to go to jail, but now he has to deal with Walker, so I don't know if it's really that lucky. The police car crashes into a walker, and once Lee escapes the situation, he meets a girl named Clementine who is all by herself, as her parents were on the trip when everything went down. This is the start of arguably the best dynamic in any video game ever. Lee and Clementine are perfect, and the way they grow closer to one another throughout the game is beautiful. And I think one of the biggest factors of that is Clementine. Writing a child character is hard. It is very difficult to make them feel like a kid and not too grown up, not make them annoying, having the right balance of them being young and still being useful. And they nail it in every way imaginable with Clementine. And they continue to nail her character in every season. We don't talk about these things. Clementine feels like a kid through and through, and she bounces off of Lee perfectly in the way that she looks up to him for guidance in how to live in this world. She doesn't feel too grown up like AJ, which I'll get into when we get to it, and she isn't annoying like Duck, even though I don't even mind Duck as a character. She honestly is one of the best written children in any video game in my opinion. And on the flip side, we have Lee, and this man makes this season into what it is. He is just a fantastic character through and through, and watching him take care of Clem and really become a parental figure for her was beautiful to see. He is amazing with Clem, but outside of her, I love his dynamics with basically every character in this game. This is something I can't say about every season, but you generally feel as if you get to know each character you interact with on some deeper level by talking to them. We have the group that we meet in the first episode that consists of Kenny, his wife Katja, and their kid Duck. And then later in the episode meeting Lily, her dad Larry, Carly, Doug, and Glenn. Doug and Glenn are basically irrelevant as Glenn leaves after episode 1 and Doug, well, most people don't pick him to survive when you gotta pick between Doug and Carly. Like, it's actually funny seeing clips of Doug later in the game. If he lives, it just feels wrong. And I love this group a lot. It's not like every character here is amazing, but the dynamic the overall group has is great. You got Kenny constantly beefing with Lily, Larry just always being racist to us, and Carly and Lee low-key hitting it off a bit. But in typical Walking Dead fashion, no one is safe, and by the end of the 3rd episode, that big group you had from the beginning is down to just Kenny. Larry gets a salt lick dropped on his head, Carly gets one tap by Lily, Lily leaves her group, Duck gets bit, and Katja offs herself. Like, you straight up can write a more gruesome outcome for a group. Just typing it out made me realize how dirty our group was done. And that's not even mentioning our boy Mark, who we met in episode 2, whose legs become dinner. And this theme of how no one is safe stays constant throughout every season, and I enjoy that. It generally keeps you on your toes wondering who will live or not. I do wish there was more variety in actually being able to have different outcomes on who lives or not, but it's not too big of an issue. These first 3 episodes of this game are just fantastic in every way. I love how there isn't some big goal that our group has, as we're just trying to survive and deal with this new world that we're in. And the game does a great job of showing you the type of world that it is now. With betrayals, murder, cannibals, the list just goes on. A great example of this is episode 2. It was a major highlight for me and arguably my favorite episode in this season. I don't know why, but cannibal plotlines are always interesting to me, and they nailed it here with the St. John's. The buildup of them being cannibals was perfect, and the final sequence of things is just done so well and shows the cruelty and decisions that you're gonna have to be making in this game and how they're gonna affect Clem. You have to choose if you want to help Kenny take out Larry, if you're gonna murder an unarmed man, and if you choose to take supplies from a car. These moments you teach Clem what it takes to survive in this world and how to act. The difficult decisions you have to make to survive. It is just beautifully done. And by the end of episode 3, we have a few new people in our group. Ben, who we meet in episode 2. I do not like Ben at all. Even though I understand his character, it does not make him any more enjoyable. And then we have Krista, Omid, and Chuck, who we meet in episode 3. Not too much to say, but I like all of them. Chuck, for the time that he is here, which is very short, makes a big impact by pushing Lee to teach Clem how to protect herself. These following scenes are just arguably the most important in Clem's entire journey throughout the 4 seasons. We even go back to this moment in season 4. Watching Lee teach Clem how to shoot a gun, cutting her hair, and telling her to keep it short is just beautiful to watch, as at this point the player is just as attached as ever to these 2 characters. We love Lee and Clem, and I assume most people feel the exact same way towards Clem as Lee does. We genuinely become Lee to the point where we want to protect her and care about her like she's our own kid. So this scene of them bonding and Lee teaching her is perfect, and I loved every second of it. One other character I want to mention here is Kenny. This man goes through so much, it's insane. In one day he loses both his son and wife, and this just changes his character forever. And rightly so, it is a terrible thing to go through. And depending on your choices, he is just a fantastic person to have by your side and is extremely loyal to Lee. He is one of the most in-depth and well-written characters in the entire franchise, and we will be diving into him a bunch more with the 2nd season. But that new group we kind of built up by the end of episode 3 does not last very long, as by the end of the game, it's practically just Clem on her own looking for Krista and Omid. The final portion of this game is absolutely wild. Ben dies in such a gruesome way no matter what. Like, this man can either plummet multiple stories, just get bitten by walkers, or get impaled falling down a house. It's wild. And talking about Ben, I already said I don't like him, and that remains true. I understand that he's this teenager who never got to see his family once all this went down, but still, he annoys me. The decisions and things he does are just comical to a point. He did not make a single right decision the entire time he was alive. But he still kinda has a little redemption arc at the end with Kenny, which was really cool to see. But moving back into things, this final portion is all about finding a boat and, well, that fails. And then Clem gets kidnapped by her stalker, a great turn of events, and to make it even better, our boy Lee gets bit. very much keeping to the theme that no one is safe and anyone can die at any point, even the main character. I like the way they have him get bit. It is done in such a casual manner, and that's one of the most realistic scenarios. It's not always going to be some blaze of glory. This man straight up just moved a piece of cardboard and got bit. But now we have to go save Clem from her kidnapper. This final villain of the game, the Stranger, is low-key really creepy. His morals, though, in a weird way make sense. This dude isn't some straight up evil person. If we flash back to the moment where we stole food from the car, that was his car, which indirectly resulted in his wife and kid dying. So he didn't want any other kids to die and thought we weren't fit for Clem. The way he went about it though is actually insane, and keeping his wife's walker head just makes it even worse. This guy was in no shape whatsoever to take care of anyone, and we dispose of him properly. But as we all know, this game does not have its Disney ending. We don't ride off into the sunset with no more issues. Lee's bite finally caught up to him and he's about to die. This final scene is one of the saddest things I've ever experienced in a video game, and it doesn't matter that this game has been out for 12 years. You are still going to catch me bawling at this scene. These final moments and interactions between Lee and Clem break me, and both their performances are unbelievable. Watching Clem lose the most important person in her life at that point moments after seeing her parents as walkers is terrible. And having Clem shoot Lee is a moment in gaming I will forever remember, but not for happy reasons. Clem and Lee's voice actors just nailed this scene to perfection. Especially Clem. I was bawling when she was saying she doesn't want Lee to turn into one of those walkers. But this was the perfect conclusion to one of my favorite stories in gaming. There is a reason that this game was as praised as it was. It's because it's a masterpiece and rightfully deserved to win Game of the Year. The characters are still some of the best out there, and the story will get any person emotional. This was a beautiful introduction into the journey of Clementine, and it only gets crazier. With the resounding success of the first game, a second was simply inevitable. And a little bit over a year later, we get the first episode of Season 2 titled All That Remains. The hype leading up to this game was absolutely massive, and I think it lived up to that hype. This is no Season 1, but I still love it a lot, and experiencing it again for this video made me realize how much I do enjoy this season. I was surprised to be looking around when making this video that a lot of people don't like this season and say it's the worst one, which is crazy to say when this exists. Again, there are definitely some issues I have with this game that I'm going to get into, but overall I still really enjoy it. One of the biggest parts of this season is how we finally get to play as Clementine and get to see her independence without Lee. And to be honest, Clementine really be going through it this season. For some reason, she is just getting cooked left, right, and center. Just in the first episode, Omi dies, she gets attacked by a group and loses Krista, gets launched down this rushing river, gets bit by a dog, finds this group and they lock her in a shed, she has to stitch herself and gets attacked by a walker in the process. She actually is going through it. But it is just awesome to see how much Clem has grown from the last game. I'd say this is probably the second best version of her. But for some reason, Telltale felt like she matured so much that the new group that we end up meeting becomes the most useless individuals and relies on Clem for every decision. This is hands down my least favorite group in the entire franchise. I don't know how they managed to make so many unenjoyable characters. There's only one that I liked, and that was Luke, and they wasted his character. In the first episode, we meet the group that we're going to be with for the rest of this game basically. We have Luke, Pete, Nick who's Pete's nephew, Rebecca and her husband Alvin, then Carlos with his daughter Sarah. Telltale basically gives us no chance to genuinely connect with these characters and get to know them. You know how I mentioned in the first season how there were times in the game where you were able to walk around and talk to your group and get to know them a bit more? That is for the most part completely absent in this game, with most of your conversations with characters not deepening your relationship with them at all. Pete could have been cool but died super early on. Nick also had potential to be useful and you actually get a chance to know him a bit. But he ended up just being kinda useless, and when he dies no one really bats an eye at all. Rebecca and Alvin are boring, and Rebecca only serves a purpose because she gives birth to AJ, who's kinda an important character. Then Carlos is a supposed doctor but can't differentiate a dog bite from a walker, and he also just sheltered Sarah to no other belief where it was impossible to make her useful. The overall story of these characters is simply wasted potential. It felt like the characters didn't have distinct enough personalities, They all just kind of leached onto Clem for help in every scenario and relied on her for everything as they sat there and did nothing. But moving on from hating on the group for now, there is stuff I do genuinely like. For how much I don't like the group, I can't deny the fact that they are interesting and make the game fun. I think the individual dynamics aren't great, but as an overall group, it is interesting watching them go through these different scenarios with Kenny and his group and then Carver's group. And the overall experience and journey you go on is crazy, and I was never bored playing this game as something was always happening, which I enjoyed a lot. But once we meet our group, we move into episode 2 and we end up reuniting with a familiar face, and that is Kenny. Gosh, Kenny. He definitely makes himself known this season. He does not shy away from the spotlight whatsoever. Okay, I have another issue with this game. I promise I do actually like this season. Arguably the biggest theme in this game is the controversy with Kenny and the rest of our group. And well, it's just stupid to be honest. This is the same issue that I'll get into in season 3. They make you pick between a character that us as the player already have a relationship with and a bond to, or a group that you just met. Like, you're constantly faced with whether or not you're gonna side with this new group or Kenny, and like, I'm picking Kenny basically every time. I know he kinda goes off the rails a bit, or well, a lot, but never once do I genuinely doubt his loyalty to Clem and how much he cares about her. I know deep down he wants what's best for Clem, and that is shown if you do side with him. He does do stupid and rash things throughout this game, and I won't deny that. But let's not act like, oh, the group was so much better. They weren't. There was not a single moment where I felt that they had my best interests at hand, so the decisions were never that hard to begin with. But Kenny in Season 2 is an amazing character. You really see how he kind of starts to boil over with the trauma of losing his loved ones, and how he clearly still hasn't recovered from it, constantly mentioning Doug and how he sees us as his kid. This trauma is enhanced with the death of Sarita and him blaming us for it. This man has gone through all sorts of pain and very much clings on to Clem and AJ basically as his last hope. I really think that he is the ultimate survivor, and even if he doesn't get along with most people, his loyalties were never in doubt, and it was interesting watching him deal with his trauma. But getting back into the story, a major part of it revolves around the main villain, Carver. The group that we meet are runaways from his group, and Carver is looking for them. We eventually get caught and are brought back to his hideout. I actually fairly like Carver as a villain, and I think it works well. I just kind of wish he was around longer, as we really only get like an episode and a half with him and are in his camp for one. He has some interactions with Clem, and even he realizes that Clem is basically the only useful one there. But that's about it with him. Oh, he also almost murders Kenny until Kenny returns the favor and actually does. I also wish the 400 Days add-on actually had some significance in this season, as all it does is just have us have characters that we recognize from that add-on. I think this entire thing had more potential than it ended up being. But while we were in Carver's hideout, we meet 3 new people who joined us. Mike, Jane, and Bonnie. And I'll be real, I hate them all. They were all kinda cool at first, but all just fell off horrifically. And once we escape Carver's base, the plot is just not really there anymore. We really don't have a goal afterwards besides surviving and trying to find a better place to live. Which I don't hate, to be honest. I know some people don't like it, but I still feel like stuff was going on. With this final portion of the game all being about Kenny versus the group. The plot points for this final section was the eternal conflict, which was definitely evident and fairly worked here. Cause at this point, Kenny is kinda crazy and the group is wanting to abandon him. This is also where Rebecca has AJ, Sarah dies, we meet Arvo. Oh my god, I hate this dude so much. Luke also dies a gruesome death. He was done so dirty, truly. Speaking on Sarah though, she is just extremely wasted potential once again. Like, no matter what you do, she is just gonna die. I thought when I saved her there would have actually been a chance of development, and then this happens. And it's annoying because I felt like she had a cool dynamic with Clem. Looking at Sarah, you could assume this is what Clem would have been like if she never met Lee. But Telltale don't do much with her and off her anyway. I wish they did more with her and gave us a dynamic with Clem with someone actually her age. The group starts to boil over though after all these events, and we come to a crossroads with Mike, Bonnie, and Arvo all trying to steal the car. We get shot and wake up in a car with Jane and Kenny. This triggers the final events of this game and one of the most memorable moments for me. the Kenny and Jane fight. I love this whole interaction, but I can't help but always think, what psycho is picking Jane? Like, this entire final sequence is done well and you feel the tension throughout. I don't think the fact that in my mind it's an easy choice to pick Kenny ruins things, but it would have been a lot better if they went with the original plan of having it be Kenny versus Luke. And I probably would have still picked Kenny, but the choice would have actually been difficult and I would have been sad to see Luke die. Like, I didn't care that Jane died. We meet Luke at the beginning of the game and it's like one of the only characters where you actually feel like you got to know. And I feel like Luke got pretty sidelined after you escape Carver's group. Jane, you have interactions with her, but it always kind of felt like she only cared about herself. But Kenny, for as deranged as he was, still clearly cared for you. And the fact that Jane hid AJ to provoke Kenny is one of the craziest things ever. Like, she is the actual psycho here. Who in their right mind is doing that? You jeopardized the life of AJ and tried to pretend that he's dead to provoke Kenny and to show that he's out of control? Look, Kenny's reaction was low-key kinda justified. AJ at that point was one of the two things that he cared about. And to hear that Jane let him die, it's a valid reaction. I really just don't understand how people are out here picking Jane. I see no valid reason to unless you think Kenny has truly gone off the rails. Again, I really wish Luke lived to be the one here in this final fight. It would have been such a hard choice and would have simply hit more. This fight between Kenny and Jane though is still iconic and I love it a lot. And again, this final fight just really shows how amazing of a character that Kenny is. Either choice you make surrounding him on whether or not you stay with him or leave him, it shows how much he cares about you and how he wants the best for you and AJ. He has his troubles, most definitely, almost more than anyone, but he still cares about Clem and AJ more than anything and he loves them so much. He is hands down one of my favorite characters in the entire Walking Dead franchise. But moving into the final decision of this game, this is what I call the most difficult choice in all of the Walking Dead Telltale. And in the end, it doesn't matter whatsoever. I'll talk about that later. When we leave with Kenny, we head to Wellington, but they say they can only let Clem and AJ in. So we have to make the choice on whether or not we want to leave Kenny and move into Wellington, which is what he wants, or leave with Kenny and not go into Wellington. This decision straight up had me pacing my room for like a solid 30 minutes. I couldn't decide, it was impossible. But ultimately, I was not about to leave Kenny after everything we've gone through, so I leave with him. And even after the massacre they perform on this character in Season 3, I still think it was the right decision. Diving into Season 3 quickly, if you go with Kenny, he will die. But if you go into Wellington, his status is left unknown, so he might be alive. I think ultimately the time you get to spend with Kenny post Season 2 is so crucial for him simply as a person. The scenes we see with him in Season 3, I don't know if I've ever seen the man happier at any point throughout this franchise. And I would have loved for him to live, so I can see why people think leaving him is better. But I don't know, I just think Kenny would have rather had that time with Clem and AJ and die than live without them. But that is not the only ending, it's just the one that I got. There are a plentiful amount of different outcomes for this game. You can either leave with Kenny, go to Wellington, leave with Jane, or leave by yourself. And none of them matter once we get into Season 3. Look, I basically only bashed Season 2 low-key, but I do genuinely still like it a lot. There are just more obvious and blatant issues with it. Even with these critiques, this is such a fun experience still. I like the overall journey you go on, and even though I don't like the group, it doesn't instantly mean I don't like the content revolving around them, as the stuff they go through is interesting and I loved it. Just for the sheer fact I had issues doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the experience. I still have a great time playing this game. I still think that it is good and a great continuation for the story of Clem and progresses the story well. That can't be said about the following season though. Season 3, in my personal opinion, is the worst season. I still have a good time with it, but I feel like it is substantially weaker than the others and ultimately serves no deeper purpose for Clem as a character, as we basically don't even get to play as her besides a few flashbacks. And around this time, this was when Telltale as a studio were starting to fall off a bit, with people starting to get burnt out from their style of games. Within these 4 years, we got 8 releases. That is absolutely insane. And for the most part, these Telltale style games seem like they can be produced quicker. But there should be no situation where we are getting 8 games in 4 years. The quality is going to drop, and that is what happened. The company overexpanded, overworked their employees, and it was starting to show in their releases. But getting back into Season 3, here we play as a new character named Javi. He was a former professional baseball player that eventually got suspended for gambling. And the main focus of this game is his whole dynamic with his brother and his brother's wife and kids. And I'll be honest, I don't hate it. I do like Javi as a character, and his dynamic with his brother is arguably the best part of this season. The whole affair kind of thing with his brother's wife Kate was a bit weird, and I hated the kids. Well, not Mariana, she was cool until... And don't even get me started on Gabe, this guy sucks. I don't even know how to describe this season. It feels like a spin-off in a weird way. This holds no bearing on any events in Clementine's life. We could have skipped this season, done a few flashbacks in Season 4, and would have been good. That is how little this season matters. And it is sad because I think it could have been great. Like I said, I do genuinely like Javi, and the internal beef with his family works well. I also love the opening of this game so much. Watching the breakout occur and people's reactions to it is something I will always love. And they do a great job showing it. But there is another issue in this game, and that is whatever they did to the visuals and graphics. I don't know if it was just my experience, but the quality just felt low, and they did some characters so dirty with how they looked. Like Kenny and Jane in the flashbacks, what did they do to them? And that final shot of Clem, bro, never let Javi touch scissors ever again. But still, the hair just looks weird, even disregarding the fact that the haircut sucks. Like, I was constantly having issues with certain parts not loading in, glitches, and the walkers just looking terrible at every moment. I don't know if this game was rushed. It probably was, it does not feel polished at all. Let's get into the story a bit more though. Like I was stating, this is all heavily focused around Javi and his family. After the outbreak, things start off with Javi, Kate, who is David's wife, and their two kids, Mariana and Gabe. They have not seen David for years at this point, and we learn through flashbacks throughout the game that they even waited at the house for months and David never went to look for them. And in these flashbacks, we kind of see Kate feeling Javi, to put it simply. And this was going on before the outbreak even started. She is actually a homewrecker. Her man David was in the other room and she was out here saying how she wants to go away with Javi. It was truly some wild things. Oh, and the lines that Javi says are so deceiving. The amount of times I picked a dialogue option and he took it somewhere I didn't want it to go was too many. But it's like the game really wants you to get with Kate. And even if you don't, she still kisses you in front of David at the end of the game. I was actually shook to my core when she did that. It could not have been done in a worse manner. There's not much else to Kate's character besides being a very divisive plot point between you and David. I really wish they did a lot more with her, as I think she had the potential to be that. Disregarding her though, a dynamic that Javi has that I think is great is him and Clementine. When I saw Clem for the first time in this game, it made me so happy. Cause I was with these characters I didn't know, and then you just hear a voice and then everything in the world is right. Clem and Javi are a dynamic duo, and I love the both of them together so much. It really has this sibling energy that I like a lot. But as much as I love them, every decision involving Clem as a choice basically isn't a choice. Like I said with Season 2, how I ended up picking Kenny a lot because there was this bond already there with us as the player, that feeling was on steroids here, and I agreed with every imaginable thing Clem did. And it seems like most players feel that way, as when you have to pick between taking out Conrad or take Clem as a prisoner, this is one of the most lopsided decisions in the entire franchise, with basically 90% of players deciding to side with Clem. But realistically, Javi barely even knows her, and the decision realistically would have been more even. There aren't too many decisions ultimately that change the game involving Clem, so it doesn't affect things too much. And talking about Clem even more, the fact that playing as her is boiled down to a few flashbacks left a very bitter taste in people's mouths. This game was marketed very much like we were going to have dual protagonists with Javi and Clem, and that would have been amazing to see. But nope, they sidelined Clem heavily, which I think was a mistake. Telltale were attempting to pull new fans in, so they kinda made Season 3 feel more like a standalone, and all it did was cause older fans not to buy it. At this point, us fans were there for Clementine, and for her not to be the main focus sucks. Again, I like the family drama with Javi, but they really should have implemented Clem into the narrative more, as this game holds no bearing on her as a character, and it just feels like she's tagging along for the ride. And you can tell even more that they wanted this to feel like its own game with how they disregarded everything about the endings in Season 2. We all know that Season 2 had its plethora of endings. We had 4 options. We could have either left with Kenny, Jane, we could have left by ourselves, or we could have stayed at Wellington. And it means nothing. They just cooked together some half-baked flashbacks of those moments sprinkled throughout the game, so they could fill the holes in the timeline from the end of Season 2 to 3. It really annoys me that they did that because you really feel like your choices don't matter at all. I was tweaking for no reason over my choices in the game because it didn't matter. It's low-key an issue overall with Telltale games where you have the illusion of choice, but I'll get into that more later. These flashbacks suck, especially Kenny's. This man is one of the most loved characters in the franchise. And for the people that chose to stay with him, especially have a close bond with him, and you decide to take this man out in the most pathetic way possible by launching him out a car window and paralyzing him, I still can't even put together how that would possibly paralyze him, to be honest. The movements he would have had to perform with his body to land in a way to actually paralyze him from the waist down is insane. It is a massive cop-out and a disrespect to one of the best characters in the franchise. This alone, I can understand why people would think leaving him and staying at Wellington would be better, because you wouldn't have to experience this pathetic attempt at writing his death. This is one of the main reasons I think it's the worst game. They just so blatantly disregard your choices from previous seasons. But moving on from the fact that they don't care about the decisions you make, let's talk more about the characters in this game. We've already spoken about most of them, but next we have Gabe. Yeah, I hate him. He's in that typical annoying teenager phase, like the one you hear that, oh, they'll grow out of it. It's one of those. And look, there are some great moments that you have with Gabe that genuinely feel sweet, and I wish we got more of that. But for the most part, Gabe is just frustrating. The part that I remember the most is the situation revolving around shooting Conrad. If you don't shoot him, Gabe yells at you and calls you a coward for not doing it. Then, if you do shoot him, later on in the game he rats you out for it and starts saying that you murdered him. I've never actually hated a character more in my life than that moment. And then, in my first playthrough, he died, so yeah, that was unfortunate. I really didn't feel that sad, to be honest, but the conversation that him and Javi had was sweet. And I don't know why Telltale were trying to make my girl Clem go for Gabe. She deserves so much better than him. Like, does she have no standards? Gabe is the worst possible option for her. Then we also have Tripp, who we meet all the way at the beginning of the game. I like him for the most part, but then he just kinda hates you at the end. And we also have Eleanor. She was great until she betrayed us for basically no reason and just threw away her character in the process. Then we have Ava, who arguably got the most comical and weirdest death in the series, the same with Tripp.
Holy shit!
You have to pick who survives, and whoever you pick to live is the one who gets taken out. But it doesn't matter, as maybe 15 minutes later, the other character dies in the most anticlimactic manner, and the group reacts so weirdly to it.
I was gonna die. She saved my life, David.
She would do it again, too. Let's keep going. Ava would kick my ass if she knew I was sitting around crying.
I genuinely felt like it wasn't real. I'm like, what just happened? And it actually does annoy me a lot that Ava and Tripp die in the manner that they do, because that decision to save one of them means absolutely nothing because both of them die no matter what. But now I want to talk about what I think is the biggest theme in this game, Javi and David. I think this is hands down the best part of the season and honestly wouldn't change too much about it. We are reunited with David and we learn that he is one of the leaders of the New Frontier, who is the group that have been attacking us. So already there's some bad energy, and Clem also had a bad past with David as well, as she was a part of their group at some point and they stole AJ from her. Very quickly though, the other leaders kinda go against David, and one of them named Joan was the one organizing all these attacks on our groups. David was unaware of this and it eventually broke out into like a mini civil war within the city. David is a great character. Not the best husband or father, but he was good at surviving. He claims this himself by saying this is what he was cut out for, this apocalypse. And one of the bigger talking points ends up being around David's family and how by the end of the game, they're kind of more like your family at that point. It's honestly sad to see, and then the whole fight that you two have was heartbreaking if you don't fight back. You just constantly saying that you love him, and once I got that prompt saying that you kept your promise to your dad, that was so beautiful. In some of the endings, David will die, and those death scenes that you get with him are done so well. Overall, I really liked how they handled Javi and David and their brother dynamic. It's one of the main focuses, and they do a good job of showing us some flashbacks throughout to show their relationship even more. This is the best thing that Season 3 did. And you have multiple endings here as well, mixed between who lives and dies between David, Gabe, and Kate. Surprise here, the endings don't really matter as this game has no relevance to the final season. Isn't that just great? Now look, I have my issues with this season, and they are plentiful. I still have fun with it though. I think they do some stuff well, like Javi's family dynamics. This game is very much the black sheep, the outcast of the Walking Dead games. It just doesn't feel connected to the rest, and Clem being a background character was a wild decision. I still had a fun time playing it though, even with its many flaws. On this day, Telltale Games officially shut down. As I stated before, Telltale were struggling around the time these later Walking Dead games were coming out. And the struggles, poor sales, terrible treatment of employees, it all built up and they closed. Much to the sadness of the Walking Dead fans as they shut down in the middle of releasing the final season of the game. As things stood, we were never going to see the end of Clementine's story. But lo and behold, our savior in this situation arose. Skybound Entertainment took over the remainder of the season to make sure it got released. Without Skybound, we would not have received this beautiful culmination to Clem's story. I adore this season, and is my second favorite behind the first. They do so much right here that previous seasons failed to do. First things first, this game truly comes full circle as the game heavily focuses around Clem raising AJ, just like Lee did in the first game. But even more with this last season, there is such an emphasis on it, and your decisions revolving around AJ affect the people around you. This is no Lee and Clem, don't get me wrong, but I think they do a brilliant job with their dynamic and the struggles of raising a kid in this apocalypse. I know a lot of people have their issues with AJ, and sure, I can see where they're coming from. AJ in this season is a whopping 5 years old. Yeah, I was shocked to learn that too, to be honest. This man looks and acts so much older than a 5-year-old. And I have two opinions on this. Firstly, it's an apocalypse. You are forced to grow up faster than normal. So it makes sense that he is going to be a lot more mature than a typical 5-year-old would be. But I think they take it to a slight extreme here. I think if he was like 6 or 7 years old, it would make a lot more sense. But I am more on the side that I think it works that he is as mature as he is because he was forced to grow up quicker. But along with their dynamic, we actually have a group that is enjoyable in this final season. In the first episode, we meet a group of teenagers that have been living on their own. So naturally, the dynamics already feel better, as for once, Clem can finally interact with a plethora of people her age. And it makes sense when she takes on such a leadership role in this season. I like basically every character here, and you generally feel like you form bonds and connections with these people. Even the characters that don't appear too much, you feel a sense of friendship with. I think they handle your group perfectly in this season. We have Marlon, Violet, Lewis, Ten, Asim, Brody, Mitch, Willie, Ruby, and every single one of these characters I genuinely feel like you knew them on some personal level. And there's also romance here, but I don't know, I wasn't the biggest fan of it and they just executed it weirdly. In my initial playthrough, I romanced no one because I thought neither of them were that good for Clem. But if you don't romance either Lewis or Violet at that moment when you pick to hang out with one of them, you don't get the chance to again. And that choice is so ambiguous. Like the first playthrough, I had no idea that I was picking who I want to have a chance to romance. And then it happened, I was like, nah, I'm good, I barely even know these people yet. But by the end, I really liked her and Lewis together, but it feels forced at the beginning, so I never feel like it's right. And Violet is decent, but if you don't say the right things around her or make different choices, she is just so annoying at times. I think just overall they could have executed the romance side better. But actually getting into the narrative a bit more, I love it. I think there's a great balance of internal conflict but also threats from the outside. The main threat in this season is a returning character. The moment I saw Lily again, I lost my mind. This was the perfect choice of a character to bring back as a villain. There's already this beef in history with her, which instantly forms more of a connection between Clem and her. It also again helps bring the whole journey of Clem full circle as she faces someone who she started the apocalypse with. Lily's group have had multiple encounters with our group prior to us arriving there. And one of these encounters, Marlon, who was the leader of our group, gave away 2 people who were with us, Minnie and Sophie. The reveal of this is still arguably my favorite part from this game. They nail the encounter in every way. With how Marlon murders Brody, how he locks us in the basement with her and we have to escape, and then the whole encounter above ground with the group was actually peak. The visuals here were stunning. Going from playing Season 3 to this was night and day. Season 4 was easily the best looking game in the franchise, and they nailed the final moments of this first episode. When I saw AJ shoot Marlon, I knew we were in for a ride with this game and that raising AJ might be more difficult than I thought. But overall, the story in this game will revolve around the fight between our group and Lily's, and I think it's handled very well and they go about things in an interesting way. Lily's leading factor for attacking us is to capture us and make us fight in a war that her group is in. But we're not like Marlon, so we actually fight back. This is practically the whole season, us setting up for battle, them attacking and stealing some of our friends, and then us going and saving them. When I boil it down like that, it generally doesn't sound like much happens, but I promise a lot goes down. We meet a bunch of cool characters and get to watch them grow bonds with one another. We're raising AJ, Clem is learning more about herself. So much happened in this last season. I mentioned before how the characters in this final season are really good, and one other character that we do meet is someone named James. This guy is just straight up weird, to be honest. I was waiting for Telltale to do it and they finally did. They had someone be a whisperer, but not just that, they were someone that saw walkers as still human in a weird way. James was tripping, truly. Always trying to tell me how to raise AJ and trying to convince me walkers aren't bad. I only played along with it since I needed his help. Not for 1 second did I believe in it even after that weird wind chime scene. They are walkers, nothing more, nothing less. And moving into the late game of this final season, we make an attempt to save our friends and do so. Leading up to it though, we get the most beautiful dream with Lee and Clem. We are back on the train where Lee taught Clem how to survive, and it's simply perfect. Watching Clem talk to Lee about her problems and Lee being there for her is beautiful to watch. And seeing Lee in these updated graphics, it's a sight to behold. She's worried about saving her friends and isn't sure if this mission is going to go well. And Lee encourages her and helps her to face it head on. This mission is absolutely insane and done so well. We get captured ourselves, have these convos with Minnie and Lily. I hate Minnie also, she is terrible. She murdered her own sister and was talking about how this was good for her group. Lily corrupted her, truly. We set up the bomb at their base and it explodes, and then we have this big final showdown with Lily, and then we have the moment where we can pick AJ to murder Lily or not. Easiest decision of my life. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! It's the best choice I've ever made. The kid poured out half a clip on her for no reason but to add insult to injury. He was tweaking out though when he was like, I enjoyed it. Even though I low-key did too, it's not the same. And then James tries to steal him from me? Actually wild. This is such a crucial part here with AJ to teach him the importance of not enjoying murder, and to only do it when necessary. It's a means of survival, not a game to enjoy. Again, they just nail the dynamic of Clem and AJ, and I love watching AJ question some of the decisions that Clem makes and them having that back and forth. So after all that, we escape the boat until Minnie appears. When she starts singing that song with the bite mark on her face, it was genuinely so creepy. And of course, 10 is being tricked by it, and now look, I like 10, but the kid was stupid. He keeps getting people taken out for his stupidity over his sister who is clearly a psycho. Like, if you don't trust AJ to make the difficult calls, either Violet or Lewis would die there because of 10. Also here we have this big fight with Minnie, which was awesome. But following that, this is the moment we've all been dreading. When Clem got bit and I saw it for the first time, I simply did not want to exist anymore. I didn't want to beat the game, I didn't want to do anything. I was in shambles. I really thought they were about to do this full circle moment where she dies the exact same way as Lee. I really thought they were about to do us like that and give us one of the saddest endings to a video game ever. If she did actually die there, it would have been one of the saddest deaths in any form of media for me. Even sadder than Lee. We have formed such a bond and a connection with Clem through all these games. We care about her more than anything in this universe, and to even think for a second that she was about to die, I couldn't handle it. The final convo between her and AJ before he swings his axe is beautiful and so sad. I don't think the convo hits as hard as the OG in season 1, but it's still amazing. It really felt full circle and you thought Clem was done for. Like, look at her, she is down for the count. The screen faded to black, and I wish my existence did as well in that moment. They really tricked us, bro. Not showing her at all, giving us a flashback of her saving AJ on his own afterwards. They tricked us. Cause when I saw Clem without a leg on crutches, I thought I was dreaming. I was like, this can't be real. Am I in such denial that I just conjured up a fake scene in this game? Can I not cope with the fact that Clem is gone? I felt like those people that see their dead loved ones and think they're actually there. But nope, she's actually alive. And at first, I thought this was a cheap cop-out from Telltale to keep her alive, but I honestly didn't care. But once you dive into her bite and compare it to Lee, it makes sense how she lived. Firstly, we know that within the Walking Dead universe, the virus is spread through the blood. When Clem fought Minnie, she got her leg cut open, which resulted in a loss of blood. This is also where she got bit, so naturally the virus will spread slower as there's less blood for it to travel through. And also, where she got bit is on her lower leg. The blood flow is just naturally farther away from the heart and brain, so it's going to take longer for her to turn. When comparing that to Lee, he got bit in his wrist/forearm. There are arteries in the wrist/forearm that have a lot more of a direct path to the heart and brain, so it's going to spread quicker. And lastly, Clem got amputated a lot quicker than Lee did. When taking all those things into consideration, it makes sense that she lived, and I'm so happy that she did. The game ends off with having one final convo between Clem and AJ, and it's just beautiful. I love them so much, especially Clem. Like when she said, "Did I do a good job?" broke me into 100 pieces. I formed such a deep bond with her as a character throughout the years playing these games, and it truly felt as if I grew up with her. And I think every single person can say that about her. There's just something different about Clem as a character. I can't quite pinpoint why, but for some reason there's just a deeper bond there, like you actually care about her. I think it comes down to the fact that we really got to see her grow up. You don't see that often in video games where you get to see someone grow up in the way that Clem did. This was the most beautiful conclusion to her story, and in my mind, it ends here. Nothing after this exists. Thank you Skybound for finishing off one of my favorite stories in gaming, and thank you Telltale for making it a reality in the first place. The Walking Dead Telltale series holds a special place in my heart. This was probably my first ever exposure to story-driven games when it first came out back in 2012. So these 4 seasons mean a lot to me as I very much grew up with them. I really don't think there are many games out there that I've experienced that are like this series, especially a character like Clementine. She is someone that we all watched grow up over the course of 6 years as these games came out. It was a journey that not many other games have brought me on. It is a gaming experience that I will always remember and one I wish I could forget so I could play them again for the first time. Besides that, Telltale were able to craft an amazing 4 seasons. Not all of them were perfect and definitely did have their fair share of issues. But even with that, these games are special and something that I think genuinely every gamer should experience. The journey that Clem goes on is one of my favorites ever, and she is one of my favorite characters in gaming, period. Experiencing these games again this year just reminded me about how special they were. We desperately need more games like these in my opinion. We are in short supply of this style of game and going on these journeys with these characters across multiple games. The Walking Dead Telltale will always be something I hold in high regard, and even with its issues, I view it as one of the best collective stories in gaming. If you guys made it to the end of this video, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you did, it would mean a lot if you guys could like, comment, and subscribe on this video. This is a video that I had a great time making as, again, this is one of my favorite franchises in gaming. Your guys' support means the absolute world to me. Thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. God bless.